John and my wife Jane hit it off when they met through a friend. They really clicked and started hanging out a lot. John never outright disrespected me, he was always nice and polite. But when you're messing around with someone else's spouse, you gotta be careful. They liked sneaking around when I wasn't home, but something was missing. They eventually told me one night in December that they wanted to take it to the next level. Jane invited John over to play cards at our place after dinner. So, John came over at 8 p.m. and Jane was all excited to see him. She even gave him a big hug, which didn't really surprise me since they've been friends for ages. We all sat on the couch and I grabbed John a beer from the fridge. When I came back, I noticed that Jane and John were holding hands and she had her hands resting on his leg. I was like, what's going on here, guys? Their faces looked like they were about to drop some bad news. What's up? I asked. Jane said, we need to talk to you about something, but we'd rather you sit down. So, I sat down and waited for them to spill the beans. So, me and John have been hooking up for the past 2 months. Our connection is just too strong, you know. Things escalated and now we really care about each other. She said she cares about me too and didn't want to cheat on me. So, we came up with a plan. John added that we can't just stop seeing each other, there's too much there. But we wanted you to be a part of it too. We'll keep hooking up regularly. You'll just be there to watch and maybe help out a bit, he said with a smile. Jane chimed in, actually, you'll have a blast. I checked out your internet history and saw you're into cuckolding porn. She rolled her eyes. I noticed you're always searching for cuckolding stuff on Pornhub, so deep down I know it's what you really want. Honestly, this will spice up our marriage. John added, so all we need from you is a signed agreement. Basically, we all agreed to these terms in the deal. I read through the papers Jane pulled out of her purse, and some terms said that she and John would be in the clear if things didn't work out, so I decided to go ahead with the divorce. Some points even mentioned different levels of physical contact, like kissing, cuddling, and even sleeping together. I sat there, speechless, not knowing what to say. Jane made it clear that she loves me, but she also likes John and what he can offer her. It's not personal, it's just how he makes me feel. I can't just walk away from it. I know he feels the same way about me. John nodded in agreement. Please sign the contract, darling. This is how things are going to be from now on. What was I supposed to do? I didn't want a divorce, but I wasn't sure how I would react to seeing Jane with another man. I looked at them again, their hands still locked, but now on her thigh. Jane stared at me intensely and whispered, maybe this will convince you to sign. I watched her draw on John's face. Then she leaned in towards him and kissed him. He responded by putting his hand on her cheek. Part of me couldn't believe what I was seeing, my wife was making out with another man. I didn't want to admit it, but the longer they kissed, the more turned on I got. I tried to walk away and act like I didn't see, but John caught me right away. Look, he likes it, he exclaimed. Jane reached out her hand to me. I sighed as I looked at the contract. With a pen in hand, I couldn't keep this from them. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate, but I've done worse. I did a bunch of research on Huckleberry for a case I was working on. You know, I'm a private eye who handles a lot of divorce cases, not to mention running my own security company. Obviously, I hadn't done enough digging, so I switched into detective mode, which I'm sure they didn't see coming. I whipped out my little recorder and hit record to make sure we're on the same page. I just want to record our convo to prevent any misunderstandings down the line, for my own peace of mind. You get that? There's a lot of fancy legal talk here. I noticed that both of you already signed and got them notarized, said John. Yeah, we just wanted to save time. We knew you'd agree to it, replied John. Geraldine, our notary will be here soon to notarize your consent. Then we can have some fun. DB looked like a kid on Christmas. Just to be clear, how long have you both been sleeping around behind my back? I can't believe I didn't catch on, Jane squeaked. Well, we've been married for 4.5 years, and for the past 2.5 years, John and I have been romantically involved, clarified John. Hey, don't talk about it like that, he's my soulmate. In fact, we've been in love for a while now. I might be a bit too excited, but come on Richard, don't be so full of yourself. She's loving enough for both of us. I saw them together and realized my marriage was over. I grabbed a pen, signed the document, and got up. I hope that's good enough for you. I showed them the paper I had written on and the signatures were there. Jane was shocked as she read it, saying, "Sorry, I'm not good at sharing." "Look here, John," I shook the beer. I had a bottle in my hand, squeezed my thumb against the opening, grabbed the contract, folded it, and stuck it in my back pocket. Then I aimed the bottle at my soon-to-be ex-wife and my former friend. I took my thumb off the neck and sprayed them both in the face with the liquid. I grabbed my briefcase, laptop, and jacket, ignored their requests to come back, and headed for the door. I bumped into Geraldine, the notary, and she said, "This is your show, Richard. You're a real piece of work." I ain't lying, I was sitting in my truck and reversed back to the beginning of the driveway. I put it in drive and started moving, turning the wheels to the left as I rolled across the lawn in front of the house and through the rose bushes along the curb. I accidentally hit the back panel of the Lexus that was parked there. I know I was acting like a kid, so don't try to convince me otherwise. Luckily, the owner was okay. I drove to her parents' house and decided to take a proactive approach. As much as I love my family, I wasn't going to be the bad guy. My phone was ringing with emails and stuff. So, my email got full and then the calls and texts stopped. I went to her parents' house, got out of the car, and rang the doorbell. They quickly heard me, and the porch light turned on. There I was, standing in front of her dad, Judge Thomas Smith, who looked pretty pissed off. He asked me, "Richard, what the hell are you doing here at this time, and where's Jane?" I replied, "I have no clue where she is, definitely not on this damn planet." Despite having a son-in-law on the way, my in-laws always treated me with love and respect. So I gave the judge the contract and set up my little recorder on the kitchen table. He starts reading it and his eyes pop out of his head. "Is this for real?" he asks. I hit play on the recorder and it all goes down. I asked if I could record our convo to avoid any mix-ups, and that's when his wife starts eavesdropping. She hears it all and her jaw drops, literally. She's in shock, covering her mouth with her hand as her robe slips open, revealing her sexy black nightie. I guess his night just got a whole lot more interesting. "Damn," he just finished reading and gave me a look. "I don't see a way out of this, do you?" he asked. "How would you deal with my situation?" His eyes squinted and he groaned. "I get it, son." Right then, their old-school landline phone rang, and his wife picked up. "Hello." "Oh, Richard is here. I need to talk to him right now," she said. Her dad grabbed the phone. "What's going on? You guys got a problem?" The person on the other end let out a scream, followed by shock. "Dad, what are you talking about? This has nothing to do with either of us." "Hey Mom, this is just between me and my husband. You need to get the contract that explains this. Otherwise, you're turning this into a whole family drama." I overheard some crying and I knew they heard her dad on the phone saying, "Hello Jane," and then hanging up. My dad looked at me and told me to go get some rest and then handle my business without doing anything stupid. I said, "Yes sir," and apologized for everything, even though it's not my fault. Sometimes trouble just shows up out of nowhere. I left, got in my truck, drove to the Hampton Inn Hotel, and signed the contract. So like last week I went ham on the minibar, then ended up in the bathroom puking everywhere. I dragged my sorry ass into the shower fully clothed and hosed myself down before stripping off and crashing on the bed. I passed out and had some wild dreams. The next morning I woke up, got my shit together, and realized I had no clean clothes. I hit up my boy Gerald, the one who ain't banging my wife, and told him to bring me some fresh clothes to our hotel room. 8:19 He was freaking out about what was happening, so I told him I'd fill him in when he got here. "Grab some Egg McMuffins and loads of coffee, hurry up dude." Then I called my office and told 2 of my top guys to start keeping an eye on the situation. I rang the bank and locked down all my personal and business accounts. After paying off our joint credit cards, I canceled them all. Next, I turned off her cell phone as part of my business strategy with the company before taking care of everything else. When I called my lawyer friend, she said to get a divorce lawyer. "My brother is really good at it, so if you want to go all out, tell him I sent you." It's supposed to be a sure thing and a big moment. I called her brother and Gerald came over quickly. I got ready and we went grocery shopping for breakfast. I filled him in on what happened yesterday and what I wanted. He told me to come to his office with everything I need. So, around 3 p.m. we'll meet up to plan our next move. Gerald was in shock when he heard the news. I can't believe she's capable of that, not just lying, but also suggesting we sign a legal document that's notarized, no less. Can you believe it? Anyway, I still have a few things to take care of. I'll give you a call later to catch you up on everything. No worries, mate. I never really trusted John completely, and now I know why. If you need anything, just let me and Astrid know. She's been like a big sister to me for the past 10 years. Ever since he left, she's always looked out for me. I checked myself out in the mirror and I gotta say, I don't look too good. Definitely better than yesterday though. The other day when I went to the bank, I got pulled straight into the senior vice president's office. I'm no billionaire, but the amount of money in my personal and business accounts was pretty hefty. He came at me aggressively, and I was confused by his actions. Of course, it's my money and I can do whatever I want with it. Is there anything we can do to change your mind? Guess where John worked? He was a senior financial consultant at the bank, so I signed the contract right there. The VP sat at his desk and turned on the recorder. His expression changed as he read the contract, but when he understood what he was seeing and hearing, his face turned red with anger. This must be some kind of joke, but I'm not laughing. I can't work with a company that has a guy sleeping with my wife behind my back. I raised my voice, and I'm pretty sure the whole office heard everything. I snatched the contract from his shaky hands and took the dictaphone. I wonder how many others. Clients are getting the same treatment. Let John Samuels know that he's about to get served with legal papers. Have a good day, sir. I walked away and as I passed by his office, I heard him yell to bring Samuels over right away. I chuckled, then stopped at the store to print 3 copies of the contract. I decided not to show the original to anyone until my lawyer had it. Then I went to see my insurance agent, and guess who I found working there? The owner's future ex-wife, Daphne Loria, escorted me to her office. I thought I heard a muffled Richard as I walked through their office. This is great, I smiled. Miss Loria stood up and shook my hand. Richard, nice to see you. What can we do for you? She appeared nervous and out of her element. I suppose you understand why I'm here, Daphne. I am canceling all of my insurance with your company effective immediately and I would appreciate receiving a reimbursement check right now. I refuse to do business with anyone who would hire a lying cheater. Just a moment, Richard, your personal feelings. That doesn't affect how my company operates at all. I haven't seen or heard anything. I threw a copy of the contract on her desk and just stared at her. Do you have to listen to the tape recording? She quickly looked through the 3 pages and checked the notary stamp and signature. She trembled a bit and said, just a moment, please. She pressed the intercom button and said, Jane, can you come into my office right now? A few seconds later, his soon-to-be ex-wife came into the office looking visibly upset. Yes, Miss Loria. Jane, you're fired. Please clear out your desk and leave. Get out now. Jane stumbled and then passed out. A few people came over and gathered around her. Laura stood up and asked if I still wanted to go through with my decision. I got up to shake her hand. It's been great working with such an honest professional. I think I can leave my business as it is. I walked past my ex-wife, who was lying on the floor, and headed to the lawyer's office. My lawyer's name was Nathaniel Sampson. He was a bit older than me but looked younger. He was smart. He gestured for me to come in. He called me into his office, offered me a drink, and asked his secretary to bring us some water. Now, Richard, I talked to my sister and she thinks I'll like this. So, what do you have for me? I signed the original contract, then turned on my recorder. After listening to the recording, he seemed more interested in the contract. Once everything was done, he pressed the intercom button and told his legal assistant secretary to make 2 copies of the tape recording. Hey, in Mr. Daniel's safe, swap out the tape and give back the dictaphone. He went back to reading, but every now and then he shot me a look. Finally, he put down the contract and asked me straight up, this is real, right? Nobody could have thought of something like this. After a quick pause, he locked eyes with me and said, okay, so what's the plan? I told him, I want to make them suffer, I want to make them regret ever crossing me. I want them to cough up a lot of money. He smirked and gave me a little smile. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. I wouldn't pass up the chance to be involved in this for anything. First off, we'll bring in a notary to question her. I've worked with her before and I think she'll cooperate. We'll have our own notary on site to make sure everything is done right. The tape will be checked for authenticity and used effectively. We're gonna take this to court and win a jury trial. I heard they both already got fired. I caused a scene at both the bank and her job. It would be even better if we just. Let's turn up the heat if we end up in front of a jury. I'll be the voice of the people. I'm already feeling good about this. The funny thing is, they have no grounds to accuse us of lying or hurting their reputation. We have proof that everything we said was true. As long as we stick to the facts, they won't be able to do or say anything. It finally clicked for me, they brought this on themselves. We had a notary come in, and once everything was ready, she went after them. She confirmed that they were trying to have it both ways. Nathaniel has everything scheduled. So, I had a meeting with the judge to present our case, and he just shook his head and stared at me. He said, I sympathize with you, Mr. Daniels. If I can, I'll do everything in my power to make things right. But are you sure you want the jury to hear all this? That's when my lawyer jumped in and said, Your Honor, my client wants maximum pain and suffering for his wife, who's technically still his wife, and the guy she was messing around with. He wants to annul their marriage and leave her with nothing. Absolutely nothing. The judge was like, all right, counselor, get it ready and let's see what the other parties have to say. Translation, so, we told the other two and told them to either sign the papers or get a lawyer. They said they were basically broke because their utilities were turned back on and they were out of work. But she wouldn't sign, and he was hoping for a big payout. Eventually, they hired some sketchy dude to be their representative. They didn't talk about the contract or recording with her lawyer. We set up a meeting at my lawyer's office to go over everything. My lawyer checked the recording to make sure it was legit. We were ready for whatever. So, Jane rolls up at 11 in the morning with her old man in tow and I'm like, what the heck? She tries to hug me and I'm like, nah, not happening. She starts blabbering about some huge misunderstanding and how I ruined her and her dad's lives, they lost their jobs, were flat broke, and had no future. I signed some papers and gave her the house, but they were still struggling big time. They tried selling it but no luck, she wanted me back in her life, in her bed, and most importantly in her bank account. My lawyer asked if she was still dating Mr. Samuels, her lawyer said it didn't matter, they were just friends. My lawyer then pulled out the contract and put it in front of the guy, telling him to try again. He faced Jane as her lawyer read the document, and when asked if she was still dating Mr. Samuels, she turned pale and almost passed out. I ain't gonna answer that, it's too personal. It's cool, Miss Farrell, you can spill the beans in court. I was smug as their lives unraveled. Her lawyer finished reading the agreement and looked like he was about to puke. You never brought this up before, he yelled, turning to my lawyer. These are all just rumors, you got no solid proof. That's when my lawyer handed over a signed statement from Miss Geraldine Schultz, a notary, along with some other stuff. All right, so I wrote up a statement and got it notarized, then he recorded the audio. Your clients were fully aware and gave the go-ahead. My dude hit play and their world fell apart. Their lawyer was freaking out, but then Jane's dad, who happens to be a judge, stepped in and set things straight. He banged his fist on the table and gave the lawyer a death stare. That's it, Jane, he said. Mr. Hoodie, you're out. And Jane signed on the dotted line. Wake up and smell the coffee, Samuels. You need to pack your stuff and get out of here by tomorrow evening. Just so you know, you're being dragged into the divorce mess between Richard and Jane. You better get yourself a lawyer before Richard screws you over. I know you won't get anything out of this, and if you try to fight it in court, you'll probably end up with even less. My wife and I are fed up with your crap and your brother won't even bring his family over as long as you're here. So, find somewhere else to crash, buddy. Samuels is like your soulmate, you like him more than your husband, so maybe things will work out for you both. I overheard him whispering, I really hope not. Jane's parents were paying for her legal fees, so she signed everything, while Samuel jumped up and ran out of the room. He disappeared off the face of the earth. I had nothing to do with the cough. 3 months later, I was the only one sleeping in my bed, feeling lonely. That happened last night. The Jones sisters promised to cheer me up tonight and all day tomorrow. Life is. Hey, so this guy Steve, he's 25 and single, just doing some general labor at a big construction company. Dude's ripped from all that heavy lifting and hitting up the gym regularly. Then there's Mike, his buddy, a total whiz when it comes to fixing cars at his dad's shop. He's been obsessed with cars since he was a little kid. So, on July 1st, this client of his invited him to a Canada Day party, but he didn't want to go solo without his fiancée. So, he convinced Steve to come along, even though Steve had no other plans. Mike was at the backyard party in the evening with a DIY dance floor, blasting music, and lots of booze. Steve was just chilling in a corner, sipping on his beer. Then this drunk chick plopped down next to him, chugged her beer, and burped out some apologies. She slurred to Steve to chill out because there's still plenty of time. Steve coolly replied that he's celebrating. She insisted they were all celebrating, but Steve clarified that he's the one celebrating. She asked if he was celebrating, to which Steve replied, "All right, are you celebrating?" Steve whispered to himself with a smile, looking forward to the drama that was about to unfold. "Yep, I'm celebrating my breakup with my ex," she declared. "He cheated on me." She then stumbled onto the dance floor, trying to bust a move to the music. Steve sat there with his beer, observing as 2 guys from the patio made their way over to join the young woman on the dance floor. After a bit, she left to grab a whiskey, giving him a smile and a cheers before downing it. He shook his head at her boldness before she went back to dancing, with the 2 guys getting closer and closer, almost crowding her. "Hey, why are you still just hanging out here?" Mike nudged Steve. "Go talk to some girls, man. There are plenty around and they're all looking for some company." Steve looked around the dance floor but couldn't spot any potential ladies. He quickly got up from his seat. "What's going on?" Mike asked, looking confused. "I'm getting another beer," Steve replied, already making his way to the bar. As he scanned the area in all directions, he realized his efforts were in vain. He then walked towards the front of the house, where cars were parked in the driveway, and further down the street, about 100 meters away, he could see some figures lurking in the shadows. He saw someone kneeling by the car door, so he went over and watched a situation that made him mad. In the car, one guy was holding her down while the other guy was trying to do something to her, even though she was trying to fight back. She was too drunk to do anything, so she was helpless. Steve yelled at them to leave her alone and get out of there. He said, "Come on, if you don't like it, just leave." The guy by the car who was coming closer, and Steve told him, "You're welcome to join in the fun, Steve." Steve acted fast and kicked the guy really hard, making him scream and double over. Then Steve balled up his fist and punched the guy with all his might, knocking him out cold. But then a bigger dude came at Steve, but Steve dodged a punch to the face and hit back with a solid gut punch. The hit knocked Steve down, and the attacker grabbed his shirt and threw him into a nearby car. When Steve hit the car door, the attacker raised his foot to kick him. Steve dodged another punch and quickly kicked the guy in the leg, making him fall over. Then he went crazy, punching and stabbing the dude until he passed out. After that, he helped the girl and carried her to his car, where she sat in the front seat. Checked her pockets and found a key that said, Eglinton Heights. Steve, who knew the city well from working on construction projects, wasted no time getting to the building. When he arrived, he parked in the guest parking lot and woke her up. He asked for her apartment number. "What's your room number?" Steve shouted out, 12, and she mumbled. Steve held her as he took her to the 4th floor. Once inside her room, he sat softly on the bed and went to the bathroom. He grabbed a bucket and went too. Steve went to the kitchen and mixed some salt and sugar in water to try and get her to drink some. He kept the bucket nearby just in case. All of a sudden, she started convulsing and threw up into the bucket. Steve wiped her mouth and helped her calm down. 15 minutes later, he tried giving her the drink again, but she threw up once more. In the afternoon, there were more incidents. Steve undressed her and took her to the bathroom, where he poured cold water over her. She was too weak to resist. After drying her off, he put her in bed and covered her up. Steve grabbed a blanket and sat next to the bed, keeping an eye on her while she slept. She woke up early in the morning, feeling anxious and staring at the ceiling. She tried to remember what happened the night before. Her heart raced when she saw Steve sitting across from her. When she took off the blanket, she realized she wasn't wearing any clothes. "You assaulted me," she shouted. "Relax," Steve said. "I actually saved you from two guys who were attacking you." "Who were they and why am I naked?" she asked, noticing Steve's bruises. Knuckles and the redness on his face. "It's time to bounce. I suggest you chill out and lay off the booze." Steve bounced out of the room as she started to come back to her senses. She remembered bits of the wild night before, a crazy party with lots of drinks, two dudes dragging her into a car, a fight, glass shattering, and then he came to her rescue. She jumped out of bed, threw on some pants and a t-shirt, and bolted out of the room. In the hallway, she heard the elevator doors closing, so she booked it down the stairs and out onto the street. Unfortunately, it was too late. All she saw was a dude driving off in a red Dodge Daytona. The next Saturday night, Steve and Mike were having some brews at the bar when Mike's phone rang. After listening to the caller, he turned to Steve and asked, "Do you know Trisha?" "Nah," Steve replied, taking a swig of his beer. "Someone on the line says they know you, best wishes pal, but you don't know her," Mike explained. "Is she trying to sell something?" Steve wondered. "Sorry, but my buddy here doesn't recognize you, and if this is a sales call, give us a call, we're not interested," Mike said on the phone after a short pause. He continued the conversation after a brief break. "She mentioned going to a party last week and you're giving her a ride home. Her name is Trisha." "I never asked," Steve commented as he picked up the phone. "Is there anything I should know?" Mike asked with a smile. Steve shook his head. "Hey Trisha, what can I help you with this time?" Steve asked. "First and foremost, I want to thank you for what you did last time. Without you, I'm not sure where I'd be or what state I'd be in right now," Trisha said gratefully. "Thanks, I just helped out someone in need," Steve said humbly. "No, you did something no one else would. You're my savior and hero," Trisha argued. "Thanks, but in the future, you should be more responsible, okay?" Steve suggested. "Yeah, I get it. I've been good since the party and plan to keep it up," Trisha reassured. "By the way, how did you get Mike's number?" "I went to the party house and asked if anyone knew you. I described you in your car," Steve explained. "I was driving this morning with no clue, then the host of the party called me and said you might know Mike. He gave me your number." "All right Trisha, nice chatting with you. I'm actually having a beer with Mike. You free for dinner tomorrow?" Trisha cut in, saying she just wanted to thank me in person. She said she'll get my number from this phone and call me tomorrow morning. "Oh, and I'm Steve, by the way." They ended up meeting for dinner at a fancy restaurant on Sunday evening. They totally dodged talking about the party and just talked about themselves and their jobs. Trisha is a data entry clerk for some supply chain company. After that, they went for a walk. Steve then drove her home. "Thanks for the great night, Steve, you're my hero," Trisha said as she kissed him on the cheek before getting out of the car. Steve watched her walk to the entrance of the building before driving off. 2 weeks later, Steve called Trisha and asked her to go see a movie with him. After some hesitation, Trisha finally admitted that she had been. "I can't wait for him to call." "I was also waiting for your call," Steve stuttered after the movie. Steve walked Trisha back to her apartment and she invited him in for coffee in her cozy living/dining room. Steve noticed a flyer for a tattoo shop on the table. "I've been thinking about getting a tattoo on my lower back," Trisha explained as she brought over 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You don't need a tattoo," Steve replied. "But I was thinking, I love your body just the way it is." Steve interjected, "Yes, you have seen me naked." Steve drew closer, planting a. He gave her a soft kiss on the lips before pulling away, locking eyes with her. "Someday I'll have to thank those 2 guys," he said. Trisha hugged him tightly as Steve stroked her back, bringing her closer. He gently licked her ear, giving her goosebumps, before showering her with kisses. Steve picked up Trisha and carried her to bed. Everything happened so fast and now here they were, after the first round. "Are you ready for round 2?" he whispered. She replied, "I'm ready until we both run out of steam." Steve stayed true to his word. After dating for a few months, they decided to get married. They found a nice 2-bedroom townhouse to rent and made it their own. They were so happy as they started this adventure together. A year later, Steve bumped into his old schoolmate Billy at the mall. Billy was networking and handing out business cards to people. "Hey Billy, long time no see," Steve said. "Hey Steve, we were just kids the last time we saw each other," Billy replied. "What have you been up to, Steve?" "So, I've switched jobs since then. I got fired from my last job," Billy explained. "Sorry to hear that. So, what do you do now?" "I saw you handing out cards," Steve observed. "I'm my own boss now. I sell insurance," Billy replied. "I'm a bit confused," Steve admitted. "I don't work for a company. I earn commission by selling life insurance and investments." "Got it," Billy clarified. Steve nodded. "Do you have a wife or kids?" Billy asked. "I work for a construction company." "Yep, married but no kids yet. How about you?" Steve answered. "I'm married too. No kids for me either, Billy. It was great catching up. I gotta run, my wife is waiting," Steve said. "Before you go, have you ever thought about life insurance? What if something happens to you or if you have kids?" Billy asked. Steve replied, "Honestly, it never crossed my mind. This is a common oversight. Here's my card, talk to your wife and then give me a call. I'd be happy to come by and chat. We usually have these meetings at home with both spouses, it's called a kitchen table conversation. I'll explain everything about protection. Future plans." Billy made it clear he's open to any questions you might have. "All right, I'll get in touch with you soon," Steve replied, putting the card in his pocket after dinner that evening. Steve told Trisha about Billy and suggested they both consider his advice on life insurance and security. Trisha wasn't too happy about the extra monthly fee. "We'll hear him out and then decide," Steve reassured his wife. "We can arrange to meet him here next week." The next week, Billy came to visit Steve and Trisha and explained his ideas. "So basically, term life insurance is different from whole life insurance. Oh, and by the way," he said they should probably start putting some money into retirement. Then Billy recommended a joint term life insurance plan that fit their needs, since they're still young. The monthly payments wouldn't be too high. A few days later, Billy showed up with the paperwork to finalize everything. Before he left, he asked for some references and gave Trisha his business card. 3 months later, Trisha called Steve at work and said, "Hey babe, looks like I'll be pulling some extra hours this week, but I'll be home soon. Around 8 tonight, okay? Don't worry, I'll cook dinner and wait for you." "Thanks, babe, you're so sweet." After dinner, Trisha talked about how her workload was increasing and the company didn't want to hire more people. She had to work extra hours 3 times that week and then had to do overtime 2 weeks later. Steve didn't complain and instead cooked dinner. 6 months later, Steve was sent to a construction site near Trisha's job. Around noon, he decided on the spur of the moment. Ask her to grab lunch with him. When he got to her office, they told him she had just gone out for lunch and he saw her car in the parking lot. Steve thought she might have gone to a nearby restaurant, remembering a nice time when he took her to lunch at a little pizza place during their dating days. He started running and after a short walk, he saw Trisha heading towards the pizzeria. He tried to call out to her, but the traffic was too loud. When he got inside the restaurant, he saw Trish and Billy. "Steve, what's up, man?" Billy grinned, greeting his friend at the table. Trisha went from being shocked to smiling in no time. "I just came here for some pizza and bumped into Steve," Billy explained. "Hey Billy," Steve replied, still a bit confused. "I'm almost done here and gotta hurry." Billy shook Steve's hand, saying, "I've got a meeting with some potential clients in 15 minutes. Good to see you, Trisha." As Billy went to the counter, Steve could tell he was feeling anxious. He paid for his pizza and started a serious conversation with the clerk. The clerk glanced at Steve a couple of times. "Hey Trisha, I was working nearby and thought I'd swing by to see you and grab some lunch. But Steven told me you should have called me first. I would have waited for you, babe." Billy walked past their table, waved goodbye, and went outside to hop into his fancy new car. "Wow, he's really moving up in his new job," Steve commented as they watched their friend drive off. "Should we go ahead and order?" Trisha asked nervously. "Is everything okay?" "Absolutely, Trisha. I only have 20 minutes left for lunch," she replied on a Monday evening while still working. Steve finally decided to check out how much they were spending each month to see how much they could save. He figured it was time to buy a house, but he was unsure because they needed a big down payment. Trisha was on top of all the paperwork, keeping it organized in the bottom drawer. No one wanted to wait for her, so Steve took matters into his own hands. He went through their old bank statements, carefully noting all their expenses. After an hour, he found some areas where they could cut back. He took a break to grab a drink from the kitchen and evaluate his findings. Suddenly, he had a realization. Steve realized and put back the drawer. He looked at Trisha's statements and noticed her income hasn't changed in a year. Steve wondered what's been going on with her. For the past 6 months, she's been working overtime, but there's no extra cash. Steve opened another beer and put the paperwork back. He's starting to think she's hiding the overtime money somewhere else, or maybe she's not really putting in those extra hours. As he was thinking, he heard Trisha's car pull up. When she got home, Steve was already on his second beer. "You look tired, hon," he said. "This job is really wearing me out. Why don't you try finding something easier?" "You know how hard it is to find a well-paying job nowadays," she replied. "When's your next overtime shift?" "Wednesdays and Fridays as usual." "I'll just heat up dinner," she added as Steve went to the fridge. As they went to sleep, Trisha fell straight into a deep sleep, but Steve lay awake, pondering a single question in his mind. Yo, so this dude thought his old lady was cheating on him. The next day, he hit up his boy Mike, the only dude he trusted. He was like, "Yo Mike, we gotta meet up this afternoon." He sounded all serious and shit. Mike could tell his homie was going through it, so he was like, "For sure, let's meet up at the pub on Wednesday night." So they rolled up in Mike's car and posted up across from Trisha's job where her car was parked. They were waiting there for like an hour, just chillin'. Finally, 3 chicks, including Trisha, came out of the building and hopped in their cars. They were like, "Let's see if any dudes come out." Steve said they should wait 15 minutes, but no mail came. So Steve texted Trisha and went to grab some beer. When he got back home with the beer, he found out Trisha had already set the table. Mike was the only one who noticed what Trisha was up to on Friday night, and he was chatting with Steve as usual. Later that night, Trisha drove straight home and fell asleep. Steve took her phone and went through all her texts and calls on Saturday. The two friends met up to come up with a plan. "That's what I did." Steve went through her phone and didn't find anything suspicious. He told Mike that she's probably deleting everything. Mike thought he might be onto something. Steve suggested that if he really wants to know the truth, he should track her every move every day. But he doesn't have the time or skills for it, so his best bet is to hire a private investigator, but it will cost him. "What else can I do?" Steve asked. "I have an idea, follow me," he said. Mike followed Steve to an electronics store and suggested that he, "Hey, can you buy 3 voice recorders that have good batteries this afternoon?" Steve set them up in the kitchen by the phone, in the bedroom, and under Trisha's car seat. Later, when they went to bed, Trisha tried to get it on with her husband, but Steve said he was too tired after a rough week. Trisha was upset and went to sleep. The next morning, Steve went to the gym like always. When he got back, he found a message from Trisha saying she had run some errands. "I had a feeling something was off, so I checked the recording stuff in the kitchen. Besides the usual home noises, there wasn't anything important. But when I played back the bedroom recording on Gadget, I saw Trisha having a convo on the phone. She said, 'Hi, can we talk? I'm in the backyard.' The other person replied, 'Good, I miss you too, honey.' Trisha mentioned that he had gone to the gym and would be back by noon. She said she was excited for Wednesday and promised to wear the black undies he gave her. She laughed and said, 'You're right, this is the perk of having flex time. Hey, where are we going this time for work? Let me know tomorrow, but please don't take me to Motel 6 like last time, I didn't like it.' 'Alright, I gotta go now, talk to you tomorrow. Love you.' Steve was shocked to find out he was being cheated on, but he didn't know who Trisha's lover was, except that he was married. This explained why Trisha never got paid for working overtime. They were seeing each other on Wednesdays, often meeting at Motel 6. Steve hurried to the bedroom, hiding something. Steve found a recorder hidden in its usual spot while searching through drawers. He found some sexy lingerie hidden in Trisha's things, which made him really mad. He decided to expose the guy's identity and their plans. Steve asked Mike for help and told him everything he found. That night, Steve acted tired to hide his stress, but he couldn't sleep because he was worried Trisha's lover might call her at work on Monday. When Trisha was in the bathroom, Steve grabbed the recorder. Steve snuck into the kitchen and slyly stashed something in Trisha's handbag. This might work, he thought to himself. All day, Steve couldn't stop thinking about Trisha and her mysterious meeting. He brainstormed ways to be ready for anything, like following them in a car he borrowed from Mike's shop. When Steve got back home on Wednesday afternoon, he saw Trisha busy in the kitchen. Without wasting a second, he quickly went to the bedroom and grabbed a hidden recorder. Okay, so he snagged her car keys from her purse, then found another recorder hidden behind the car seat. He decided to listen to that one first, thinking there would be a lot of recordings on it. He told Trisha, "I'm gonna be jamming out to some tunes on my computer, let me know when dinner's on." He put on his headphones and listened for about 30 minutes to the recordings from her morning drive to work, hearing the car engine and radio chatter. Then there was a short pause before he heard a door opening and closing. Trisha was apologizing for not answering the phone earlier because her boss was around and things were crazy. She was talking about a cabin by Lake Simcoe with its own private beach that sounds amazing. Apparently, it belonged to one of their customers, Billy, who is doing really well in business. Steve seemed interested and said maybe one day he'll join Billy in selling insurance. He also mentioned investments. Trisha assured Billy that this time she'll give him her full attention and keep it a secret from Steve. "Usually I'll park my car in the same spot and ride with you. I gotta get back to work ASAP, bye sweetie." With Trisha's affair and their meeting plans clearer, Steve called Mike right after dinner. He told Trisha he was going to the pub to meet Mike for a drink, and reminded her not to be late. In reality, both friends met in a parking lot after Steve spilled everything to Mike. The latter asked about his plan to shock them when they returned. "I messed up their trip by giving them 4 flat tires. They should have left Lake Simcoe earlier so Trisha could get home from work at her usual time. By the time she got home, I had already left with all my stuff. I'm gonna send a recording to Billy's wife and hire a cheap lawyer to divorce her. It's a solid plan, but someone's gotta sneakily mess with all the tire valves at the cabin." Mike reminded Steve, "I know it's messy, but I can't think straight." "What kind of car does he have?" Mike asked. "He has that crappy thing," Steven replied. "What do you mean?" Mike exclaimed. "You'll see, I think that model will be recalled in a few months," Steven said. "Why?" Steve asked. "There's an issue with the suspension, a few loose bolts could ruin the car," Steven explained. Steve grinned, "You're not suggesting?" "Yes, that's just what we need." "Can you make sure they become stuck there?" "Lake Simcoe is over 100 miles from Toronto, with my skills I can slightly loosen the bolts so after about 150 miles. So, everything starts going crazy and the jerk has no clue what's happening. He's gonna have to ask for help, but how am I gonna make that happen?" "I got a plan," Steve said with a sneaky grin. When Steve got home, Trisha was already knocked out. He searched for the jerk's business card. On Tuesday morning, Steve called Billy at work and invited him over that evening for some investment tips since he had some cash to throw around. Even though Billy had a client meeting at 7 p.m. Steve wanted to change the plan at first, but Billy finally agreed to come over at 9 p.m. Steve quickly texted Trisha about Billy coming over and asked for some investment advice during lunch. Trisha called Steve to talk about their saving habits and ask about his investment plan. She said, "I was going to surprise you, but since you asked, I'm expecting a big raise soon." Steve replied, "That's awesome, we should celebrate." Trying to sound excited, he added, "Yes, we'll talk about it." Trisha then asked, "Am I still your hero, Steve?" Asked if you're Trisha for sure, Trisha confirmed, lying a bit. Steve thought for a moment after hanging up. Later that night around 9 p.m., Billy showed up at the house. Steve let him in, and Trisha warmly greeted her lover without the couple noticing. Steve turned off the outside lights, and the three of them sat down. Billy started explaining the benefits of mutual funds all of a sudden. Meanwhile, Mike parked on the street and walked over to Billy's car, which had a professional lift service. In the darkness, Jack went unnoticed and quickly acted. He jacked up the car and slipped underneath, using a wrench and a rag to hide his tracks. He knew exactly which bolts to loosen and covered them up with the rag to make it look like nothing had been tampered with. Steve picked up on the silent communication between them, even catching their secret foot contact under the table while acting like he didn't notice. Steve kept the conversation going as Billy checked out some investment options and left brochures on the table. Steve grabbed 2 beers and heard whispers behind him, then got a text from Mike. Steve smiled, saying, "Mission accomplished. You brought up your wife's job before, but I forgot about it." Steve avoided looking at Billy. "Jenny works at RBC Royal Bank of Canada downtown. You should get Whitey as your partner, or else I might as well invest with your wife." They all laughed together after finishing their beers. Steve promised to look over the brochures and suggestions and call back in a few days to confirm everything after Billy left. He then poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Would you like one?" Steve, "Hey, Trisha, do you want some wine?" Trisha, "Do you not remember that I don't drink anymore?" Almost yelling. Steve, "I know, just making sure. And you know you can't handle mixing beer and whiskey." Trisha, "I'm just having a good time, babe. If you get too wasted tonight, you're sleeping on the couch," Trisha said as she walked upstairs to her room. Steve pushed his chair back and sat down, staring at the untouched glass in front of him. His mind was racing as he replayed the scene. So, this dude figured out that his marriage was basically over because his wife was cheating on him. He sat there for like an hour, thinking about it. Then he poured out most of his whiskey, only leaving a little in his glass. He went to the kitchen sink and rinsed his mouth out with the leftover whiskey. When he went to the bedroom, he found his wife, Trisha, asleep on her stomach in her usual t-shirt. He lifted up her shirt and kissed her, which woke her up. She was like, "Steve, what the hell are you doing?" He tried to calm her down, saying it was all good. But she tried to leave, and Steve wouldn't let Trisha leave me alone. She smelled like alcohol. "Stop it," Trisha defended herself. "I'm your husband and protector, I have every right. Please, darling, I'm so tired. I have a tough day tomorrow. Can we do this another time?" Steve was furious, repeating these phrases to himself. He decided he could push further, wanting what every man desires. Trisha begged, "Please don't do this to me." After a few minutes, Steve relaxed, satisfied. "Why? Why would you do this to me? Are you with someone else?" "Your Mrs. Trisha started bawling. "I've been wanting to do this for ages and you always said no," Steve retorted coldly. He let her go to the loo where he could hear her crying. "She's crying 'cause I beat her lover to it," Steve chuckled to himself. He followed Trisha into the bathroom and stood next to her under the shower. But as soon as he walked in, she left after cleaning herself up. He went back to the bedroom and found Trisha curled up in a ball, sobbing, "You hurt me." "Hush," Steve muttered. Hugging her and trying to calm her down, she was like, "Don't touch me," and firmly pushed his hand away. Steve decided to go for round 2, claiming, "You're mine, I'm marking you as my property." Trisha, feeling confused, stayed quiet as he moved on to the second round, demanding, "Do you belong to me?" in a fit of anger. After a few minutes, he finished up, got dressed, and headed to the guest bedroom, locking the door behind him. Trisha looked worn out the next morning as she got ready to leave, wearing a scarf. Trying to hide the bruises on her neck and red eyes from a sleepless night, she grabbed her purse and headed towards the door. "Will you be back after work, Steve?" she asked, feeling exhausted. After a long pause, Trisha opened the door without waiting for a response. "Are you coming home later?" Steve persisted, and she turned to face him with tears in her eyes. Trisha replied, "You're my husband, this is our home. Where else would I go?" "Do you want to talk about last night?" he asked, but she shook her head. "Not now, I'm already late," Trisha muttered before leaving. Steve was thinking she'd rather see her lover than talk to her husband. Is she really that worried about me? What did I do to deserve this treatment from her? Mike called Steve when he got to work, saying, "Hey Steve, I followed her like you asked." She parked near her office at the mall and waited for the guy. As soon as he showed up, she hopped in his car and they drove north. Thanks for the heads up, Mike. I'll keep you updated on what's going on between Trisha and me. Meanwhile, his wife had already walked in. Hey, why are you being so quiet in the car? You seem distracted. Aren't you excited? Billy asked nervously as they drove down the highway. This is Steven, what's up with him? He was so confident last night, it's not like him. What do you mean by confidence? Trisha confessed, taking off her scarf. He said things like I was his property, that I belonged to him. And this morning, he left his mark on me when I was leaving. He even asked if I would come home after work. Does he suspect something? Does he suspect something? I don't know, maybe we were being cautious. Maybe he feels ignored, maybe I didn't meet his expectations without realizing. Don't beat yourself up, Trisha, but he doesn't deserve it. I'm cheating on him with his friend, it's just a physical thing between us. You love him, I get it, but he won't get it. Do you want to go back? No, I just need a break, but without the intimacy, I'm still hurting. I hope you get where I'm coming from. No worries, thanks Billy. They should be at their destination by now or close by. Steve took a quick look. He's gonna hand over his watch to Billy after that mess last night. It's all he can think about, can't shake the image of Billy and his two-timing wife from his mind. Can't wait for the moment, he tells himself with a sly grin. Managed to score a long coffee break by pleading with his boss about some urgent personal stuff. When he finally got to the cabin, Billy impatiently waited for Trisha to jump out of the car and run to Green Lake. This place is so peaceful and gorgeous, Trisha whispered as she closed her eyes. Lookin' into your eyes and talkin', a deep breath, I see you smilin', Billy said with a smile, beckoning for a hug. They embraced for a bit until Billy suggested they take a walk along the shore. They strolled hand in hand until Trisha's phone rang, interrupting the quiet. She glanced at the caller ID and ignored the call. Steve asked Billy what was up, and Trisha nodded. A few moments later, the phone rang again, and Trisha turned it off. Steve shouted from his car, I bet that jerk agrees with her, and called another number, saying, Mike, I need you. Billy asked his friend for another favor, wondering what he should do if the guy calls his workplace. Trisha admitted she hadn't thought about that and said she'll just say she took a personal day after what he did to her last night. Just then, Billy's phone rang and he didn't recognize the number. Trisha warned him not to answer it, suggesting it could be someone important or a potential customer from headquarters. But Billy decided to take a chance and tapped the green phone icon. Before he could even say hello, a man's voice came through, asking him to tell Trisha to pick up the phone. Husband called, but the call got cut off. Billy was frozen, still holding the phone to his ear. What happened? Who was it? Trisha looked worried. Billy stammered, I couldn't recognize the voice. What did he say? Trisha grabbed his shoulders and shook him, he told you to answer Steve's call. Oh my God, he knows everything. Trisha was shaking. We need to go turn on your phone. He ran back to the car and Trisha followed. She turned on her phone and it started ringing right away. Is this him, Billy? Hey, Steven, can you please pick up the phone? Trisha is upset and wants to explain something to you. Steve, this situation is not what you think it is. Let me clear things up, Trisha cried. There's nothing to explain. Steve yelled into the phone, with Billy overhearing. I've known everything for weeks. Your work hours are flexible, and you have a day off next week to meet up. And you're even wearing the black underwear he bought for you. Listen to me, Steve, enough. You're a disgrace. Do you realize he already has you, and now he can have you too? I'm throwing your stuff out and talking to a lawyer. Hey Steve, we need to talk. I found out that you faked our hookup at Motel 6 and I have proof. Trisha found out and she's devastated. I have copies of everything, you might as well make it into a movie. Trisha was heartbroken and told Billy that she loves you, but you keep lying to her. Is this how you show love? I'm sorry for what I did, please give me another chance. I even gave you a chance this morning, but you're still seeing your side piece. Tell that asshole I know where his wife Jenny works. I'm on my way with a DVD, he better meet me at the bank in 40 minutes. I want him to tell me why I shouldn't show Jenny the movie. Not a minute over 40. Steve hung up and switched off his phone. Steve knew it was hard to get clear answers in times of chaos. Billy was freaking out when Trisha told him about Steve's plans. "Get in the car," he yelled at Trisha. "Try to reach him and convince him not to meet Jenny." He turned off his phone. Trisha cried as she tried calling the men again, following Billy's orders. And giving Trisha his phone, she quickly looked at the screen and saw it was Mike, his best friend, but Mike didn't answer. "Let me try with my phone," Trisha suggested. Damn, he turned off his phone while Billy was driving at 100 kilometers per hour. "You won't make it in 40 minutes, Billy." "I have to, I can't let him ruin everything I've worked for," Trisha said, looking at him in disbelief. "When I call Jenny, I can't stress her out, she's 8 months pregnant." Damn it, as they approached the highway, Billy sped up to over 150 kilometers per hour, who does he think he is? "I can't believe that loser is your excuse for a husband, Billy. He's not a coward, just useless and can't please his wife." Those words really hurt. "He's the most good-looking man I've ever met, and yet you ended up in bed with me, Billy. Don't act like I'm the only one you've cheated on, you're disgusting. If I had known it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. I'm sorry I even called you back, Trisha." She was crying quietly, tears running down her face, "But you didn't feel bad about being in bed with me, did you, Billy?" He was driving at 200 kilometers per hour, swerving between lanes to avoid traffic. "I really hope we don't get there and Steve hands the DVD to your wife who doesn't meet her husband's expectations." "Can you just shut up?" Billy yelled. "She's useless, making her husband look for satisfaction somewhere else. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure I'm not the first person for you. You're gonna make me cheat on you if you don't stop nagging. I swear, I'll pull over and kick you out of the damn car." The car suddenly started shaking violently, causing him to tremble all over. Trish and Billy exchanged horrified looks as he tried to slow down and steer the car away, but it wouldn't budge. The car ended up crashing into a railing and flipping over, sending both of them screaming when the airbags went off. The car then smashed into a tree with a deadly impact, with a branch breaking the windshield and puncturing the airbags where Billy was sitting. Trish was in shock. The car was totally wrecked after getting hit by a branch. It was so messed up that it would have taken firefighters hours to get it out. Later that day, Steve got a call from the cops saying his wife was in a car crash and was getting treated at South Lake Hospital in Newmarket, a suburb north of Toronto. He acted all shocked and worried, asking a few questions before being told to go to the hospital. He rushed over to Mike's place to break the news, making Mike freak out and panic. "What the heck? What happens if the cops find out someone messed with the bolts?" Mike asked. "They won't, as long as we've covered our tracks," he reassured. "There's no evidence linking us to the car. We should just stay quiet." But then came the response, "You knew the risks when you asked me to make the call this morning." "I had a feeling, Mike, you're a piece of work. I did what needed to be done." "So what's the plan now?" Mike asked. "You're gonna drive me to Newmarket. I don't want the cops catching my stressed-out partner driving alone. And most importantly, I need to do my thing." A little while later, a nurse brought Steve into the waiting room. After a few minutes, 2 cops came over and sat next to him. "Do you know Billy Wilson?" asked the first officer. "Yeah, he's an old buddy from high school and also our accountant," Steve replied quietly. "Is he on good terms with your wife?" the other cop asked. "I'm not really sure what you're getting at. Are you asking if they're more than just friends?" Officer Steve frowned. "I don't get it." "Did you know they were having an affair?" the first cop pressed. "No way, that can't be true. Trisha wouldn't do that. She wouldn't cheat on me, she wouldn't do that." Steve got up. "I need to see her, I need to see my wife." "Where is she?" "Your wife is in intensive care," the cop #1 told him. "I was only told she was hurt in a crash." "What happened? Why is she in intensive care?" "She was in a car crash with Billy Wilson. Witnesses say he was driving towards Toronto and he died instantly. Your wife was badly hurt before passing out. She said to tell Steve she's sorry." "Excuse me," Steve broke down. "All right, Steve, come with me down the hall, the doctor wants to see you," the nurse said, pointing to the third door on the right. "I'm Dr. Martino. I'm sorry about your wife's accident. Please take a seat." Steve wiped his eyes, trying to ease his pain as the doctor continued, "We've heavily sedated her. What I have to tell you is not easy. You have to be strong, Steve." The doctor's gaze urged him to listen. "Your wife has lost both her left foot and right eye. She's got broken ribs, internal organ damage, and a severe head injury. I'm sorry, there's no easy way to say this. Steve, I'm sorry to say that she's on life support. The doctor made it clear that the choice is all yours. When can I visit her?" Steve asked, his voice breaking. "She can't see or talk, but she can hear." A nurse came in and gave some papers to the doctor. After looking them over and signing a bunch of pages, he passed them to Steve. "Check these out to make sure they're right. Once you decide, write your name and sign next to mine on the line. You'll need a pen." He gave one to Steve. When Steve walked in, he saw Trisha all messed up in bed with machines and stuff next to her. He said, "It's Steve." Trisha tried to reach out to him, but he was like, "I'm not gonna touch you, you're hurt and things are not looking good. This is what happens when you mess with Billy. We wouldn't be here if you didn't get mixed up with him." Trisha was crying, and he mentioned that Billy died in the accident. The monitor showed some weird pattern. "I fought for you, Trisha. I tried. I did everything to protect you, I risked my life for you. You used to see me as a hero, but now you're betraying me." Trisha tried to explain, but she couldn't. "If you don't love me anymore, you should have just been honest. I would have understood and let you go. Instead, you chose to lie to me, play with my feelings, and break my trust. Luckily, we don't have kids together. And now you expect me to forgive you. How can I, when I'm so angry?" Steve took the paper and signed where needed. "He came to my house to sell life insurance, but ended up kidnapping my wife." Trisha was struggling to breathe. "I'm gonna end this, it's for the best." Steve gritted his teeth. "I'll never forgive you, rot in hell you sneaky bastard." Steve stood up and leaned in close to her ear, whispering, "I messed with his car last night and I'll be cashing in on your life insurance soon." The monitors went crazy, setting off alarms. Dr. Martino and two nurses rushed into the room. Steve handed the doctor some documents, nodded, and left the room. Thanks for listening today. Hey, if you liked this essay, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you've got a story to share about your own or someone else's situation, don't be shy to reach out. Take care.